Hi, I'm Linda Piccini, and for those that know me, I love to use the terminology recipe for sewing. There's a lot of different recipes, especially when it comes to using specialty threads on your serger. As many of you know, and probably one of the reasons why you purchased a baby lock, you can use just about any fabric and thread in your machine, especially if it has our automatic thread delivery. It just manages all of the tensions and everything. You don't have to worry a bit about it. So you don't have to worry about the stitching, but maybe sometimes you have to worry a little bit like, how do I get that thread in there? This video is going to show you a couple little tips about threading. The very first tip that I want to show you is one that has a lot to do with getting your machine threaded initially. I've got some standard serger thread on my machine, and sometimes I've noticed that I don't pay attention. How about you? Do you ever do this? You're getting ready to thread the machine and you're talking to somebody and you click it down and you're ready to go over to the place and you realize, like, I just put that in the wrong thread guide. And if you went a lot farther than me and maybe even completely threaded your looper, you might be going like, I don't want to do that over again. I've got a tip for you. This is one that you want to make sure that you store in your memory bank, and that's this, that you can't, first of all, you need to know you can't lift this up to get it out of the way. We've kind of got you locked in place, which is a good thing most of the time. But did you know you could do this one thing? I'm going to hold on to the thread that it came actually from my spool here, and I'm going to bend it back on itself. And when I do that, I'm going to put it right back where my thread was before. Did you hear that click? Guess what? I just freed it. Simple, easy step. So if you click somewhere that it's not supposed to go, just clip it in again, just like you did initially. You'll be able to lift it up and get it out of the way. That's one tip. The next tip that I have is really about threads, as I mentioned. So what we have here is, this is an Aeroflock thread. And what Aeroflock does is it's one of those threads that it kind of really expands once you've got it on your project, right? So it fills in, it looks really pretty if you're doing a narrow rolled hem. But on some threads, this is probably not one of those threads, but you might even find other brands where it really just looks like a spongy mess. Like, how do you blow that through? Because it won't. Let me show you a tip. This is what we call a bypass method, but I'm using a thread cradle. So it's a cradle I make with thread. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a little bit more of my serger thread here, and you can use any serger thread that you have. I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to give myself a nice long piece, and I'm going to fold it in half so that I have two pieces here, and I'll just go ahead and cut that on the side of my machine. Now you guys all know that in order to thread my machine, I have to engage my threading port. I'm going to rotate my hand wheel towards me. Once it's clicked, I know that I'm ready to go. So I'm going to put it into my upper looper, just a skosh, hold on to the end, blow it through, and now my thread's all the way through, and my little cradle actually exists just as a way for me to be able to introduce my thread. So now I'm going to take my Aeroflock thread and I'm going to replace it here. I've already removed my little cone holder, drape my thread up over the top, and as always, you want to make sure that on thread like this, or any thread, that you pull enough down so it touches your thigh. And this way you'll have more than enough to go through. I'm going to introduce about an inch of my thread into this thread cradle, and then I'm going to pull on where my thread blew through, making sure that this doesn't go around here. And I'm going to pull that thread through, and there you go. That's one way that you can take thread that won't blow through the threading port and take it through by using a thread cradle. Now, the second technique that I'm going to show you is one that's really good for thicker threads that maybe even if you wanted to, doubling them might make it a little bit hard to put that thread through. And this is actually what's called a bypass method. And to do that, I'm going to start the same way that I did before. I'm going to go ahead and take my thread and just pull it out of the way here. And so to do my thread cradle, I'm going to start with my thread up here on my stand again. And this time, if I was really going to be serging with this, I would have one of my little cone threads, flat little holders with the sponge top that I would have underneath here. But I'm going to drape my thread up over the top. Again, I'm going to click it in place. And so I mentioned that our automatic thread delivery basically says that you can use just about any thread that you want, and your machine is going to measure the thickness of the fabric and the thread that you're using, and it's going to make it go super easy for you. So to get this in here, I'm going to touch this. And so it starts exactly the way that our other technique started. So I'm going to hold on to the end and I'm going to blow it through most of the way. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm holding on to this looper piece and I'm going to grab my Allen wrench and watch down here, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to expose that thread inside of my loopers. I'm going to pull this back, and what you're going to see is right down here, I actually have this thread. And this is the thread cradle end right here, right around my Allen wrench. And I'm just going to take that end, this time again making sure that I've got enough thread. And this time I'm going to take it and fold it in here. And I'm just going to allow that to be pulled through the eye. And if you notice, your machine is actually even sloped to accommodate this. So there is no need to shy away from thicker threads. One rule of thumb is if you're using a thicker thread, it takes up more space, and you definitely want to make sure that you change your stitch length for it to be a lot longer to be able to accommodate all of those threads. So now that you have this tip, don't worry about trying to get different threads blown through, because you can use the bypass method. So there you have it, another tip from me to you. See you next time.